Hey y'all, I'm JD and welcome back to the Dimensions Woodworks Woodshop. Today we got a really cool project. We're going to do a set of live edge end tables with hairpin legs. This was the first time I had ever used hairpin legs on a build, and I had also never done bow ties, and I'm going to tackle both in this project. So let's get started. So we start this project off with these couple of special cookies that were given to me by the client. These pieces of wood were saved from a tree that came from the house that her kids grew up in, and she wanted to do something memorable out of them so she could keep them around for a really long time. So because they were just about the right size and there were two of them, we decided to make a set of end tables. I used the wedges to keep the slab from rocking on the work surface and then secure it to the workbench so that I can begin to flatten one side. It doesn't take much to hold it down. I just use a few screws, and that ensures that the piece doesn't wander around the bench while I'm running the router and the flattening jig over the top of it. Then it's the same for the cookies as it is for my regular lengthwise slabs. I set the depth of the router so that it just makes contact with the highest point on the piece. Then I just remove a small amount of material with each pass and adjust the router bit down incrementally until I get a flat surface all the way across. I flip it over and resecure it to the workbench. But now the bottom side is flat, so there's no need for the wedges. This piece was nearly twice the thickness of the other slab, so I had to remove much more material from the first piece than the second. The ultimate goal for me here was to make sure that the slabs were on the same plane so that they would end up being the same overall thickness. When it was all said and done, we had removed quite a bit of material from these two pieces of wood. Using the surfacing bit on the router leaves these tiny grooves throughout your workpiece, so I had to go back and rough sand those, and then it was time to clean up the edges. I wanted to remove any of the live bark still active, so I got the wire wheel on the angle grinder and that worked great. Then I used my random orbital sander to finish it off, just to take care that I didn't remove too much material. So these two pieces had some pretty bad checks in them, and I decided to stabilize those cracks with epoxy as well as use bow ties to try to seal that gap. I prepped the area with painter's tape so that I wouldn't have any color bleed whenever the epoxy cured. Then I peeled away the tape as much as I could and sanded it flush with the belt sander and then the random orbital sander just to finish it off. This process allowed me to flush up the epoxy with the surface and get rid of that tape that was essentially glued to the piece. Then I took a trip to my buddy Donnie Carter's house of the Maker Minded podcast and formerly the Green Woodworker podcast. I had Donnie CNC out these bow ties for me so that I could have at least one piece of the equation be extremely accurate to start. While I've seen many videos of makers using these CNCs in their shop, it's just really cool to watch in person. You plug it into the program and the thing does its work. And considering how thick these two big walnut bow ties are, they come in at just over 1.25 inches, the machine cut them out relatively quickly. And Donnie showed me a really cool trick with the CNC. Rather than setting up tabs in the program, he just makes the depth of cut a hair shy of what the thickness of the material is, then the drum sander sands away that last little bit of material and it falls free from the main piece. Now that we've got our bow ties cut, we can begin the layout to create the inlay for where those bow ties are going to rest in the piece. I picked up this really cool trick from Ben over at Cleancut Woodworks on Instagram. He uses painter's tape to do his layout for inlays and for dovetails. It allows you to get a really good visual representation of what the negative space is and the waste material that needs to be removed. On the first piece, I just applied pressure to the top of the bow tie, then cut around it with the marking knife to give me my negative space for my inlay. For the next ones though, I tried a little something different. I applied CA glue to the bottom so that when I cut around the edges and pulled the piece up, the tape came up with it. On the larger bow ties, I had to persuade it a little bit and hit it with the rubber mallet. It didn't take a whole lot of force to knock the piece loose, and then you could just pick it up and the tape would come with it. Another trick I picked up from watching Ben is making these relief cuts close to the edge of the line. This gives the material somewhere to go when you make the straight down cuts that are going to be perfectly on the edge of your inlay. And now when we make the cuts with the chisel to define the very edge, the material doesn't blow backwards out because it already has somewhere to go. Then it's time to get to work with the router with an up spiral bit. I use the router to hog out the bulk of the material and making sure to take care to not go all the way to the edge of the cut. I use a chisel and a mallet to do the fine tuning for the edges of the bow tie. Then I use a router plane to clean up the very bottoms of the inlays to make sure that they are all dead flat. Now that I've got the two larger bow ties cut, it's time to do the setup for the smaller bow ties that'll go in the piece. Using these smaller, much more normal sized bow ties went much more quickly than the larger ones did. Then once all the fine tuning was done, I'd gotten pretty close on my fit for all of the bow ties. Adding the small chamfer on the bottom side of the bow ties helped them slide into the inlay much more easily. So when I had gotten these two pieces of wood, someone had tried to make a table out of them before and just drilled screws through the top into some branches for legs. And obviously that didn't work out really well. So I had to hide those holes, and in order to do that I just drilled it out and then used an oak dowel to plug those holes. In order to give the glue somewhere to go, I had to take a little bit of material off the dowel itself, so I chucked it up in my drill and used a piece of sandpaper to get material away evenly and quickly. Then it was time to go ahead and glue the bow ties into place and give them their permanent new home. I just pressed the bow tie firmly into place and then tapped it home with a rubber mallet and a piece of scrap wood. Then for the dowels, I coated them evenly with glue and went through the same process as the bow ties. Then I wiped away the excess glue with a damp rag so that I did not discolor the piece whenever I applied the finish. After that, I just used my pull saw to flush up the dowel with the surface of the workpiece. Then I arranged the mounting brackets for the legs on the bottom of the workpiece and carefully laid out where all of the holes were to be drilled so that the screws could attach the hairpin legs to the cookies. Then I pre-drilled all the holes for the mounting brackets. Also painted all the screw heads to match the legs. For the finish on this piece, I was really excited to try this new Maker Brand Co. Simple Finish with wax. I really enjoyed using this finish. It was much more thick than most hand-rubbed oils, and it kind of stayed where you put it, which I think would work out great if you were applying it to a vertical surface. The contrast between the walnut bow ties and the oak slab turned out looking great. I can't recommend this simple finish enough, and I will definitely be using it again on upcoming projects. I applied 2 coats, and the luster and the sheen that was given from this oil was just terrific. Now after the finish was applied, the final step was to mount the legs. I set the chuck pretty loose on the drill so that I could drive the screws most of the way in, and then I finished them off by hand with a Phillips head. I really loved how these tables turned out. The bow ties looked great, and the hairpin legs just looked awesome. And I'm so glad that this family can now treasure these tables for generations to come.
Thanks so much for watching, y'all. I really do appreciate it. While you're here, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and check out some of our other videos you may be interested in. And until next time, don't forget to get better every day.